Mr. Romanus was a billionaire known across the country for his booming building materials empire, yet he lived like a beggar. He drove a rusty old Peugeot, lived in a decaying house, and counted every grain of rice, every slice of yam, and every naira spent. His wife and children suffered under his extreme stinginess, begging for basic things like school fees, food, even hair and textbooks. But one night, after they secretly took money from his stash to buy him a new car, everything changed. In a twist of fate, Romanus died in an accident with the same old car he refused to replace, opening the door to freedom for his family. For the first time, they lived, laughed, and enjoyed the wealth he spent his life hoarding. This is the powerful story of how greed can imprison a man, and how freedom begins the moment fear dies. Sit back, relax, and find out what happened in this wonderful story. Mr. Romanus was a man who had everything money could buy, yet he seemed to have nothing when it came to generosity. Across the country, he was known as a wealthy and successful businessman, dealing in building materials. Contractors, developers, and ordinary people admired him and envied his wealth, but those closest to him knew the truth. Mr. Romanus was stingy beyond imagination. He carried a large black nylon bag under his armpit wherever he went. Inside were stacks of money and a calculator, his constant companions. "I want to economize my money," he would say whenever anyone asked him for anything. Even his own family had grown used to this. Despite being a billionaire, Mr. Romanus lived in an old, worn-down building. The walls were faded, the furniture outdated, and his car was a battered Peugeot, looking like it had survived decades. His wife, Bridget, a woman of elegance and patience, lived in quiet frustration. His two children, Chiamaka and Chibuike, had grown up learning that asking for anything from their father meant a lecture, a calculation, or a meager fraction of what they actually needed. "Things are hard, and the market is not moving," he would reply whenever money was requested. Even the simplest desires of his family were scrutinized, measured, and judged. If someone asked for 50,000 naira, he might give 5,000 and call it economizing. Life in the Romanus household was dictated by numbers, counting, and frugality, even when there was no need for it. Mr. Romanus's obsession with money wasn't limited to big amounts. Even the smallest expenditure became a battle. He would measure every grain of rice, slice yams into 7 exact pieces for the week, and calculate every spice to the last pinch. Meals were planned as if they were business investments. When Bridget or the children tried to enjoy their lives, he would scold them, taking bread and tea away. The household, despite its wealth, was like a prison, with freedom limited by the obsession of a man who valued money above comfort, love, and even common sense. And so, the stage was set for a family trapped between abundance and austerity, dreaming silently of a day when they could taste freedom. One night, Bridget gathered her courage and approached her husband. She knew how careful she had to be with her words. "My husband, please, I need money to buy new hair. This one is old and tattered," she said softly, trying not to provoke him. Her voice trembled slightly, but she hoped that he might understand her need. Mr. Romanus's eyes immediately widened, and he instinctively reached for his calculator. "How much are we talking about?" he asked sharply, as if the mere idea of spending money was a crime. Bridget hesitated and then replied, 120,000 naira only. The number seemed to shock him beyond comprehension. "What, 120,000? How many bags of cement is that? Let me check," he exclaimed, pulling out the calculator and tapping at it furiously. Minutes passed as he calculated, muttering numbers under his breath, as if the sum could be magically justified by math. Finally, he leaned back, picked some notes from his nylon bag, and handed her exactly 1,200 naira. "Please manage this one. Business is so bad," he said, as if he had performed a great act of generosity. Bridget accepted the money quietly, forcing a smile she did not feel. She left the room, shaking her head in disbelief. How could a man with so much wealth be so stingy even for the simplest things? She knew that in Mr. Romanus's mind, economizing was more important than fulfilling a simple request, even for his wife. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling frustrated and disheartened. She remembered how lavish life could be for a family with their wealth, yet all she and the children had ever known was careful measurement, rationing, and endless calculations. The very next morning, Chiamaka and Chibuike approached their father with quiet hope. Their textbooks for school were old, worn, and falling apart, and they knew it was time to request money to buy new ones. "Papa, please, we need money for our textbooks," Chiamaka said cautiously, her voice soft and hesitant. "For how much?" Mr. Romanus asked immediately, already pulling out his calculator and tapping at it with intense concentration. 50,000 naira, Chiamaka replied, trying to sound confident despite her nervousness. The moment she spoke, Mr. Romanus's eyes widened, and he almost jumped out of his chair. "I don't have such an amount. Do you people think money grows on trees?" he barked, shaking his head in disbelief. He reached into his black nylon bag and pulled out 5,000 naira. "Please manage this. Share it with your brother. The economy is very bad," he added, handing over the small bundle of notes as if it were a fortune. Chiamaka and Chibuike accepted the money silently, their hearts heavy with disappointment. Over the years, they had learned the painful truth. Their father's wealth was always locked away, measured, and rationed. Even the smallest requests required justification, calculation, and endurance. Life in the Romanus household was dominated by numbers, and love often felt measured in coins. The children whispered to each other that it was unfair, that there had to be a better life than this constant scrutiny, restriction, and stinginess. Despite the frustration, the siblings never stopped dreaming. Every night, before falling asleep, they prayed that their father would change, that one day he would see that wealth could be used to make life easier and happier for the family. They imagined a house where food was not measured to the last grain, where money was not a source of fear, and where happiness did not depend on rationing. But deep down, they feared that their prayers might go unanswered. Each day was a careful balancing act. Navigate the anger, accept the small sums given, and secretly hope for a day when they could experience freedom, joy, and abundance. Even in school, the lack of resources was a constant burden. Chiamaka and Chibuike often had to share books, reuse worn-out notebooks, and make do with old stationery. Other children could buy new uniforms, stationery, and textbooks without thinking twice, but for them, every naira counted, and every request was a battle. In the Romanus household, food was not simply prepared or served. It was measured, calculated, and rationed like a business transaction. Every day, Mr. Romanus would enter the kitchen carrying his ever-present black nylon bag. He would take out a tuber of yam, place it carefully on the kitchen table, and begin measuring it with a tape. Each tuber was sliced into exactly 7 equal portions. Then he would call out, "Bridget." She would approach quietly, accustomed to this ritual. "This is for the week. Please manage it. The economy is very bad," he instructed, handing over the portions as if he were distributing treasure. Rice and beans were treated the same way. Every grain, every handful, every spice was counted meticulously. Bridget and the children quickly learned to eat in silence, careful not to overstep the precise limits their father set. Any deviation, using too much rice, too much oil, or taking more than their allotted portion, was met with scolding. "Why are you people bent on lavishing money in this house?" Mr. Romanus would shout. "Learn to manage." He would sometimes take food back from the table if he felt the portions were being wasted, leaving the family hungry and frustrated. It was as if every meal were a test, a reminder that in the Romanus house, money and resources were always more important than comfort, enjoyment, or even love. Bridget often sighed quietly as she watched her husband meticulously measure food. She had once dreamed of a life of comfort, laughter, and freedom for her family, But Mr. Romanus's obsession had turned even the simplest joys into exercises in restraint and discipline. The children, too, learned to hide their small pleasures, eating what they were allowed and secretly wishing for a day when food could be plentiful and shared freely without calculation. Every meal was a lesson in patience, endurance, and careful planning, shaping their lives in ways they did not fully understand at the time. Mr. Romanus's Peugeot was a sorry sight. Its faded paint, scratched doors, and battered tires told the story of decades of neglect. The engine groaned every time he started it, the brakes screeched at every stop, and the seats were torn and uncomfortable. Yet, despite being a billionaire, he refused to replace it. Each morning, he would mutter, "Why waste money? Business is not moving," as he climbed behind the wheel and drove to his office. The children and Bridget often watched in silent frustration, knowing that their father could afford a new, sleek car but chose to cling to the old one like a badge of his thriftiness. Bridget, graceful and patient, had begged him countless times. "Romanus, the car is unsafe. Please consider buying a new one," she would say softly, hoping her pleas might finally reach him. Chiamaka and Chibuike, too, had learned to request things carefully, fearing their father's anger and scolding. But Mr. Romanus would always respond the same way, "My old car is fine. Why should I spend money when I can economize?" His words became routine, echoing in the family's minds like a constant reminder that money mattered more than safety, comfort, or dignity. Even on weekends when the family wanted to go out together, the old Peugeot was a source of stress. The engine would wheeze and cough along the road, the horn often refused to work, and strangers would sometimes stare in disbelief that a man of Mr. Romanus's wealth would drive such a decrepit vehicle. Yet, he remained oblivious to all this, focused entirely on saving money and measuring every expense down to the last naira. The children, though frustrated, learned to adapt. They would sometimes joke quietly with each other about the car, giving it nicknames and pretending it was a relic from a distant past. Bridget, meanwhile, endured with quiet grace, hoping that one day their father might understand that wealth should enhance life, not complicate it. But deep inside, the family also began to notice something else. Despite their father's obsession with money, his rigidity created opportunities for small rebellions, secret joys, and private victories that no calculator could control. The Peugeot, old and worn, became a symbol, not just of their father's stinginess, but of the life they secretly dreamed of leaving behind one day. Years passed, and Chiamaka and Chibuike grew into bright, ambitious teenagers. They had dreams of a future beyond the strict limitations of their home. One afternoon, filled with a mix of hope and hesitation, they approached their father with what they thought was a reasonable request. "Papa, we need money for our jam forms so we can enroll into the university," Chiamaka said, her voice trembling slightly. Mr. Romanus's reaction was immediate and sharp. "For what?" he shouted, his face twisting with disbelief. "Chibuike, you will join me in the business, and Chiamaka, you will join your mother in her shop." "I don't have any money to waste on university," he added, waving a dismissive hand. The children's hearts sank as they realized that their dreams of higher education were being dismissed out of hand. The hope they had nurtured for years seemed to vanish in an instant, replaced by the harsh reality of their father's obsession with economizing. Chiamaka and Chibuike had grown up seeing the world through their father's lens. Every naira counted, every request questioned, and every indulgence denied. Even their most basic needs, from textbooks to meals, were rationed and measured with extreme precision. And now, their ambitions for a brighter future seemed impossible to reach. Yet, despite the disappointment, the siblings refused to give up entirely. Every night, they prayed quietly for a father who could change, someone who could understand that wealth was meant to provide opportunities, not limit them. Bridget, too, felt the sting of her husband's rigidity. She had always dreamed of a family where the children could pursue their dreams freely, where education was valued above frugality. But in the Romanus household, every decision was dictated by obsession with money. She watched her children's faces fall and felt a deep sense of helplessness. She knew that Mr. Romanus's love for calculation and measurement had created a barrier between their family and a life of comfort and opportunity. One night, Mr. Romanus returned home with an unusually large amount of money. He had been counting and recounting it all day at his office, muttering numbers under his breath, absorbed in his obsession with ensuring that every naira was accounted for. When he entered the living room, he placed the bundles on the table and began to carefully count them again. Exhausted from the day's work, he eventually dozed off, the black nylon bag lying beside him, filled with the wealth he so carefully guarded. Bridget and the children had been watching him quietly from the shadows. They had grown used to the rhythm of his obsession, the daily ritual of counting, measuring, and rationing. But tonight, an idea sparked among them, a bold plan that required patience, courage, and a touch of cleverness. Silently, they moved around the sleeping figure of Mr. Romanus, taking a portion of the money. They did it with such caution that he remained completely unaware. The rest of the cash was left untouched, carefully replaced to avoid suspicion. As they completed the act, a quiet sense of triumph and relief filled the room. The next morning, Mr. Romanus awoke in a flurry. His eyes scanned the table, and his heart skipped a beat. "Who took my money?" he shouted, panic rising in his voice. He looked around the room frantically, but no one responded. Bridget, Chiamaka, and Chibuike remained calm, pretending as if nothing had happened. Mr. Romanus hurriedly grabbed his nylon bag, muttering about betrayal and theft, and rushed out of the house, leaving the family to their quiet satisfaction. That night, as the family gathered together, a new energy filled the house. They whispered excitedly about the possibilities, dreaming of what they could achieve if they continued to take careful, strategic steps toward independence. The very next evening, Mr. Romanus returned home as usual, his mind consumed by work and money. But when he entered the compound, he froze. There, gleaming under the dim lights of the driveway, stood a brand new, sleek car. Its polished surface reflected the warm glow of the house lights, a stark contrast to his battered old Peugeot. He could hardly believe his eyes. "This people have killed me. I knew someone tampered with my money last night," he shouted, panic and anger mixing in his voice. Bridget, smiling gently, approached him. "Papa, we bought a new car for you because your old car is no longer befitting your status," she said softly, trying to calm his fury. But Mr. Romanus was already pacing back and forth, his mind racing. "Shut up. Do you know how I struggle to make this money every day? Did I tell you I don't like the car I am driving? Did I complain to anybody?" he shouted, the anger in his voice echoing through the house. Without waiting for an answer, he picked up his phone and called a car vendor he had known for years. Within minutes, the vendor arrived, took the car, and handed over cash to Mr. Romanus, as if he were undoing a crime that had never been committed. The children watched in silence, trying not to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. Chiamaka and Chibuike had grown accustomed to their father's strange relationship with money, but this episode took it to a new level. Every attempt at generosity from the family seemed to be met with disbelief, panic, and frantic action to reclaim what he considered his rightful property. After the incident with the new car, a quiet tension settled over the Romanus household. Mr. Romanus continued his routine as usual, counting money, measuring yams and rice, and scrutinizing every small expense. But the family had gained a newfound sense of empowerment. That night, as Mr. Romanus slept, Bridget and the children quietly spoke in whispers, planning how they could continue to claim a small portion of freedom in their restricted lives. Their hearts were filled with cautious hope, the first real taste of independence they had ever experienced. Chiamaka and Chibuike had learned the power of patience and strategy. They knew that any overt challenge to their father's control would be met with anger, scolding, and punishment. So, they plotted in subtle ways, taking small amounts of money when possible, sharing food portions secretly, and dreaming of the day when they could live without fear of rationing. The sleek car incident had shown them that even the most rigid control could be temporarily circumvented, and that knowledge sparked a quiet rebellion that grew stronger with each passing day. Bridget, too, felt the shift. Years of enduring Mr. Romanus's stinginess had taught her patience, but this moment reminded her that careful action could create change. She began to encourage the children, quietly teaching them how to act wisely, strategically, and safely. Every small act of taking a little extra food, sharing a portion, or managing a small sum of money became a lesson in independence and resilience. Slowly, the family was learning that their lives did not have to be completely dictated by Mr. Romanus's obsession with money. Meanwhile, Mr. Romanus continued his rigid routines. Each day, he counted money with the same intensity, measured food with the same precision, and scolded anyone who dared to appear wasteful. Yet, the family had learned to move within his boundaries, to bend the rules carefully without attracting his suspicion. The old Peugeot still groaned in the driveway, yams and rice were still sliced and measured, but the family's spirits were different. They carried a quiet hope and subtle confidence, knowing that their small rebellions were creating cracks in the walls of restriction. As the months went by, Chiamaka and Chibuike continued to grow, their ambitions quietly flourishing in the shadows of their father's stinginess. Every day, they witnessed Mr. Romanus's obsession with money, the careful counting, the strict rationing, the measuring of every grain of rice or slice of yam. And every day, they learned patience, resilience, and cleverness. Each small act of rebellion, each secret triumph, strengthened their resolve. The dreams they had once shared only in whispers were now vivid, alive, and urgent. One evening, as Mr. Romanus slept after a long day of work and meticulous money counting, Bridget and the children gathered in hushed tones. They discussed plans to access some of the money that had always been hoarded, enough to fund their studies and a few modest dreams. The sleek car incident had given them a blueprint. They now knew their father's obsession with control could be navigated with caution and timing. Each of them understood the importance of patience, strategy, and subtlety in executing their plan. Chiamaka thought about the university and the books she would finally be able to buy. Chibuike imagined the tools he would need to prepare for his future business. And Bridget considered the relief she would feel knowing her children could finally pursue their ambitions without rationed resources holding them back. The plan was simple but risky. Take only what was necessary, avoid detection, and gradually create opportunities for independence. Every detail was discussed, calculated, and refined, much like Mr. Romanus would have done, but with the aim of freedom rather than hoarding wealth. When the night arrived, the family moved in silence. Mr. Romanus slept soundly, unaware of the careful steps being taken around him. Money was quietly moved, stored in a safe place where it could be used for books, school fees, and small investments. Each act, though small, represented a monumental shift in the family's power dynamic. For the first time, Chiamaka and Chibuike felt the thrill of agency, the knowledge that they could act without asking permission, without waiting for begrudging approval. By the following morning, life appeared unchanged on the surface. Mr. Romanus awoke, checked his money, and left for work as usual, muttering about the economy and hard times. But beneath the surface, the family had changed. Small, careful acts of courage had created a foundation for independence and opportunity. Chiamaka and Chibuike realized that their father's obsession, though suffocating, could be navigated with patience, cleverness, and courage. The Romanus household, long ruled by stinginess and control, was beginning to witness the quiet emergence of freedom, hope, and possibility. With the careful plan in motion, the Romanus household began to experience its first moments of subtle extravagance. Chiamaka and Chibuike, armed with the money they had quietly secured, decided to make small, meaningful changes to their lives. For the first time, they bought schoolbooks without rationing or hesitation, each textbook a symbol of opportunity and a tangible step toward their dreams. Their excitement was contagious. Even Bridget felt a renewed sense of hope as she watched her children engage with their education with joy and freedom. Despite their careful planning, the children were acutely aware of the risks. Mr. Romanus's obsession with money had not diminished. Each day, he continued to measure, count, and ration, watching for any sign of waste or mismanagement. But the children had learned to move strategically, balancing their desires with caution. Every small indulgence was deliberate, calculated, and executed with precision. The thrill of successfully navigating these restrictions strengthened their resolve, teaching them the value of cleverness, patience, and careful timing. Meanwhile, Mr. Romanus remained absorbed in his routines, unaware of the subtle shifts happening under his roof. He continued to count his money obsessively, measure food meticulously, and scold anyone who seemed to be wasting resources. Yet, the family's quiet victories were growing. Each success, though small, reinforced the children's belief that one day, they could fully claim their independence. The Romanus household, long dominated by frugality and control, was beginning to feel the first true stirrings of freedom, hope, and joy, a taste of the life that had been denied to them for so many years. As the children grew older, their confidence in navigating their father's strict control increased. Chiamaka and Chibuike had experienced small victories, tasted the first flavors of freedom, and now felt ready to take bolder steps. They began to plan more significant acts of independence, always ensuring that each move was carefully calculated to avoid immediate detection. Their patience and cleverness had become their greatest tools in a household dominated by stinginess and obsession with money. One evening, while Mr. Romanus slept deeply after counting his money for hours, the family quietly gathered. They decided that it was time to make a bigger investment with the money they had been secretly saving, something that would benefit them both immediately and in the future. Chiamaka would finally have the resources to pay for her jam forms and university preparation, while Chibuike could purchase the books and tools he needed for his own aspirations. Bridget oversaw the process, ensuring that every action was executed with precision, just as her husband might have done, but this time, with the aim of building freedom rather than hoarding. The operation was delicate. Each naira taken had to be calculated, every step carefully executed. The children moved silently, their hearts pounding with the thrill of independence. For the first time, they felt a sense of true empowerment, a knowledge that even within the strict confines of their father's household, they could act boldly and achieve meaningful goals. The night passed with quiet success, and by morning, the plans were in motion. Books were purchased, forms filled, and preparations made for a future that no longer relied entirely on Mr. Romanus's begrudging approval. The next morning, life appeared unchanged on the surface. Mr. Romanus woke, muttering about the economy, counting his money, and preparing for another day of business. Yet beneath the calm, the family had quietly transformed their lives. Each careful action, each strategic move, brought them closer to the independence they had long dreamed of. Chiamaka and Chibuike felt a rush of hope. They realized that even the strictest control could be outwitted, and that patience, courage, and cleverness were just as valuable as money. As the years passed, Chiamaka and Chibuike grew stronger in their resolve. Their small victories, strategic acts, and clever maneuvers had taught them the power of patience and calculated risk. Every day under Mr. Romanus's stingy supervision was a lesson in endurance, cleverness, and quiet defiance. But one day, a sudden and shocking event changed everything. The old Peugeot, battered and unreliable, gave way to fate on the road. It was late in the afternoon when Mr. Romanus, driving his usual route home, lost control of the car. The vehicle swerved violently, colliding with a tree. Neighbors rushed to the scene, but it was clear that the accident was severe. Mr. Romanus, who had spent decades hoarding, calculating, and rationing, was gone. The family was left in shock, grappling with a mix of emotions, grief, relief, and a sudden, almost overwhelming sense of freedom. For Bridget and the children, The accident was tragic in its severity but transformative in its consequences. The door to independence, long blocked by stinginess and obsession, had finally opened. In the days following Mr. Romanus's death, the family began to navigate life without fear. The old building that had once symbolized frugality and limitation became their domain. Yams and rice no longer had to be measured with extreme precision. Meals could be prepared with abundance rather than calculation. Chiamaka and Chibuike could pursue their studies, pay for university fees, and even start planning for their own businesses. Bridget, free from the constant control, began to enjoy life in ways she had long denied herself. Despite the bittersweet nature of the events, there was a profound sense of liberation. The family's small, strategic victories over the years had prepared them for this moment. They had learned how to act wisely, seize opportunities, and navigate challenges with patience and cunning. Now, unshackled from their father's obsession, they could finally embrace the wealth that had always existed but was carefully rationed. They spent freely, bought the things they had long desired, and invested in their future with confidence. Celebration mingled with tears as the family honored both the tragedy and the newfound freedom. The lessons of resilience, patience, and strategy, learned under years of extreme stinginess, now served them well in a life no longer controlled by fear or rationing. Chiamaka and Chibuike finally experienced the joy of abundance, while Bridget reveled in the liberty to care for her family without restriction. Life had changed forever. The Romanus household, once dominated by obsession, was now free, vibrant, and full of opportunity. With Mr. Romanus gone, a new chapter began for Bridget, Chiamaka, and Chibuike. The household that had once been ruled by rationing, calculation, and constant fear of extravagance was transformed overnight. For the first time in years, meals were no longer measured with painstaking precision. Yams were sliced generously, rice and beans were cooked in abundance, and the spices long rationed were now used freely. The family could finally experience the comfort and joy of living without fear or constraint. Chiamaka and Chibuike embraced their newfound freedom with enthusiasm. They enrolled in university, purchased textbooks, and invested in their future without hesitation. Dreams that had long been postponed due to their father's stinginess were now pursued with determination and excitement. Bridget, too, allowed herself to indulge in long-desired comforts, upgrading her wardrobe, redecorating the home, and caring for her family without restriction. The once overbearing shadow of Mr. Romanus's frugality had lifted, and the household flourished. The family also discovered the joys of responsible spending. Cars were upgraded, homes improved, and opportunities seized. Unlike the oppressive limitations they had lived under, their wealth was now a source of empowerment rather than fear. They celebrated, not recklessly, but with a sense of purpose, ensuring that each investment and purchase brought happiness, security, and growth. The lessons of patience, cleverness, and careful planning they had learned under Mr. Romanus's reign guided them now. They knew how to enjoy abundance without squandering it. Despite the freedom, memories of the past lingered. Chiamaka and Chibuike often reflected on the years of extreme rationing, the counting of money, and the measured meals. They realized how those hardships had shaped them, instilling resilience, strategic thinking, and the ability to seize opportunity. The stinginess of their father, though suffocating, had inadvertently prepared them for the life they were now building. Bridget, too, recognized the strength she and her children had gained. They had endured, learned, and finally emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to enjoy life fully. The Romanus household, once dominated by obsession and fear, was now a place of celebration, abundance, and joy. The family no longer lived in the shadow of a man who counted every naira and measured every meal. They were free to dream, act, and live without restriction. Chiamaka and Chibuike thrived in school and business, while Bridget enjoyed the comfort and satisfaction of a household finally at peace. The years of careful patience, strategic action, and quiet defiance had borne fruit. Finally, the Romanus family could live fully, embracing wealth not as a source of fear, but as a tool for joy, opportunity, and growth. The door of freedom had been opened, and the family walked through it with confidence, hope, and gratitude. Life, once measured in strict calculations and endless restrictions, was now theirs to enjoy, fully, abundantly, and without hesitation. Wealth is a blessing, but when money becomes a prison, life loses its meaning. Mr. Romanus spent his whole life protecting his riches, yet never enjoyed them, and never allowed his family to grow. In the end, the same things he refused to change cost him his life. Money has value only when it is used. True wealth is not what we keep, but what we share, invest, and enjoy with the people we love. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Share your thoughts about this story in the comment section because I will love to read them. And, guess what? I have more amazing stories coming soon. So, like, share and subscribe. Hit the notification bell and stay glued to Folktales by Zida. See you around.